Hi guys, welcome back. Today's going to be a fun tutorial, really simple and versatile. You can use this piece as a wall art. You could use it as a background for greeting cards or stationery, and it's really simple to do. We're going to be practicing a few techniques, including color value, color blending, lifting paint off of our paper, and texturizing with a little bit of salt. So I'm going to walk you through the colors and the materials. I'm going to be using 3 colors here: Sepia, Scarlet Lake, and Burnt Sienna. I'll show you how to mix these colors on the palette in a minute. For paper, I'm using my Arches cold press paper. I have started to use Arches because my absolute favorite paper has been discontinued. Cansen's Heritage cold press paper. It's really hard to get, and when you can find it, it's really, really expensive because there's not much left out there. So I've switched over to Arches, which is obviously a really nice paper as well. I have it here sitting on a background of just like a white paper. It's just a scrap piece of paper that I painted on the backside. So I'm using that just for some contrast for you guys to see a little bit better. Our brush, I'm going to be using just one brush. My favorite Princeton Neptune 12 round brush. Really great brush, lifts paint beautifully and absorbs a lot of paint, carries a lot of paint in the brush. We'll need a cloth or a paper towel or a rag just for removing excess water from the brush. We have our little jar of water, and we have some salt, which I'm going to show you how to use at the end. And lastly, our color palette and our washi tape. The washi tape, you can use painter's tape if you want to. If you are going to use painter's tape, make sure to get the gentle type. I think it's yellow, at least where I live. But if you can find washi tape, I recommend it just because it's guaranteed not to tear your paper. If you are going to use painter's tape, just test a little section of the same paper somewhere else and place the tape and then pull it off, and just make sure it's not tearing any paper with it. But otherwise any of those tapes should work just fine. So what we're going to do to start is we're going to take our tape and we're going to just tape our edges down, leaving a little bit of extra space on either side just so that the paper adheres to the background page. So that's a little bit better than the one I did at the top, but I'll hold it down with the side pieces. So then you're going to go along the side. This is just to create a nice border for the piece once you're done. And it's a lot easier to work with, I find, than trying to work right at the edge of the paper. So once that's secure, I'm just gonna put this to the side for a moment and we can start mixing our colors. So I've already gone in and activated. If your paint is dry, you need to activate it. So I've got my Scarlet Lake here, and I've got my Sepia here, and my Burnt Sienna here. It's okay if these colors already start to mix. Like, I think I have a little bit of Sepia there, but that's fine. So what we're aiming for is a really nice light terracotta color, but because we're going to be starting with our lightest color value, we really need just the absolute lightest wash. So that means that basically with whatever you're mixing on your palette, if you place that paint back and clean off your brush, that's the water you almost want to be using. Like that's sort of the amount of water to pigment, which is really low. So the color value is less than 10%. If you're not comfortable with using that water, you can, on a separate little section of your palette, create that same wash and just keep that to the side. I'm gonna put it right here so that we can see it, and then come back to your page. Okay, so somewhere, let's get started. Somewhere along the middle of your page, we're going to start by drawing sort of like a mountainscape in the background. And it's quite light, so I'm gonna remove just a little bit of pigment from my brush, and just around the middle, I'm gonna go down, up again, and then fill in that space with my water. So just keep dipping your brush and fill out that space nicely. If you need to, you can remove some water from your brush. And you want this to be very, very light, very soft. So I'm just going in and I'm continuing to lift. You can see I'm sort of lifting some of the paint off my paper just to get a really nice even spread. So now we're gonna wait for this to dry. We want it to be absolutely 100% dry before we apply the next layer, because we really want these edges to be very crisp. So let's let that dry and then we'll continue. Okay, so once this is completely dry, we're gonna work on the next layer. So the next layer is going to be, I would say, about 20% more pigment. So we're gonna start going into a deeper color value by adding more pigment to our palette. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna dip my brush and I'm going to take a little bit more sepia and a little bit more red, and I'm gonna deepen that pigment just a little until I have something a little bit darker than what's on my page. And with the second layer, I'm going to create a little bit of space between my first layer and my second layer, and then I'm gonna start building upward asymmetrically, still maintaining a rough kind of feel to the mountains. And then I'm gonna dip my brush and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna bring that color down. Don't worry if it doesn't look perfectly, even and blended at the beginning. We want the edge of the paint, sort of where my brush is, to be like darker. We want that edge to really be defined and then soften on its way down. At this point, I'm gonna take a little bit of salt, and because I have enough pigment on my page, it's going to be a little bit more visible. So what the salt's going to do is it's going to act as a absorption, sort of like as an absorption mechanism, where it's going to pull the water and the paint from wherever the salt is and create these little speckles or spots on the page that will add sort of a really nice rustic texture. So we're gonna let this second layer dry, and we're gonna repeat again with the third layer. Okay, my second layer is now dry, and I really like that edge that's formed and dried really nicely. I'm gonna remove any of the salt that you can remove. Some of it might get a little bit stuck, that's okay. You can remove it once all the layers are done. So with the third layer, I'm going to create a little bit more asymmetry. I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna touch this edge almost, and then go down and then back up. So to do this, I'm gonna, again, deepen my pigment a little bit more. So now I'm at about 50% color value. So that's, you can start to see that my pool of paint is getting darker. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water. I have it sort of where I want it. I'm just going to start here. I'm gonna go down and then back up. I'm gonna dip my brush again in the water, and I'm gonna take that pigment down. And remove some of the paint from my brush with my rag, and then just go across nicely. There we go. Again, I'm gonna take a little bit of salt, and just in one section, maybe here, and a little bit there, drop a few little grains and let that dry. Okay, my third layer is dry. You can start to see once I begin to remove some of the salt that you're getting these sort of grainy little bits where there's no pigment. I really like that. With the fourth layer, 1, 2, 3, fourth layer, I'm gonna add a lot more salt and a lot more pigment so that we get a lot of texture there. So with this fourth layer, I'm going to add a lot more pigment to my palette. Like so, and get that really deep, dark red color. So it's about, I would say 50% Scarlet Lake, 50% Sepia. And I'm gonna start from here and I'm gonna work my way down and create a lot of space between these two layers. Really rugged, really rough. I think I'm gonna go a bit higher. And then take that pigment right down. So now I'm gonna take a little bit more salt. And you can start to see that it instantly sort of starts to grab some of the pigment. I'm going to show you a zoomed in look of how the salt is absorbing the pigment. So you can start to see as it's drying, it's really pulling a lot of that pigment into the salt. Just like that. We're going to let this layer dry and then I'm going to show you the final piece. And we're going to remove it. So all layers are fully dry. I'm going to go in, once it's really, really dry, you can go in and remove, sort of just scrape some of that salt off. You don't have to. Some of it might be quite stuck on, so do that gently, like that. And there you go. I really like sort of the slow build of pigment in the layers. It looks really nice. I'm going to start and remove the tape from my edges. Let me know in the comments if you guys want to see a video where I digitize this piece, or any piece for that matter, using a camera, and how I bring that into Photoshop and create like a digital file that you can use to create, let's say, invitations or greeting cards or things you might want to send by email. Or maybe you want to use this in some templates for social media, or there's so many different things you can use this for. But let me know if a video like that would be of interest to you, and I'll create something where I'll show you how I do that. So there's the finished piece. I'm gonna get really close and show you guys the texture in mine. I think, you know, in hindsight, looking at this, I probably would have added a little bit more salt to each of the 4 layers. You can start to see there's some lighter sort of speckles here and here, but I think I would have wanted a bit more. But in general, I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. I'm gonna show you a couple of ways to use this in my stories in the next coming days. I don't know how I'm gonna use this piece. Perhaps in the foyer, we're working on a gallery wall sort of composition in the house we've just moved into. So I might actually use it, frame it, and put it up there, in which case I'll show you how that looks. But in the meantime, if you've had a moment and you've created a piece and you want to share it, I'd love to see it. Feel free to post it and tag me on Instagram at donatadelanoart. You can send me an email if you have any questions. My email is donata@donatadelanoart.com. And give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Leave a comment. Send me some feedback on this one or on anything you would like to see in the future. And I will be back in a week or so with another video. Thanks, guys.